Hello, Leo. Welcome to Gemini season. Gemini is an air element sign, and air feeds fire. Fire creates wind. Gemini in your chart uh, illuminates and inhabits what's called the solar 11th house. And the 11th house is a place of big sky energy. If you've ever been to a place where the sky is really vast and maybe you can see for 100 or 200 or 300 miles in any direction, and the clouds are enormous, right? You can watch them moving across the landscape of the sky. This is the feeling of Gemini in the Leo solar charts. And when we engage with Gemini for Leo, the space gets bigger, the sky gets bigger. Opportunities to see far and wide expand. And that is particularly true in Gemini season in 2024 because we are going to experience the once every year or so shift of Jupiter into a new sign. And this year, Jupiter is coming into Gemini. And Jupiter has not been here for 12 years. And so if you think back to 2012, you might have some fun thinking about what happened then. How did your world expand? Um, and every 12 years, Jupiter comes into a new sign. It spends about a year in each sign. And Jupiter is considered to be the gift giver of the zodiac, the greatest benefic. And the 11th house is one of the luckiest places in the chart wheel. So, right off the bat, I want to say, welcome, Leo. This season is opening up a period of opportunity for you that is really emphasizing growth, adventure, and exploration. This is a time that calls you to open your mind, expand your perspective, and look and sense and explore beyond what is your normal, to reach to space and work actively with inspiration. And one way you can do that right now is by taking a big, deep breath with me. And in the feeling of taking a big, deep breath, keep doing it. Keep taking some big, deep breaths. Because the feeling of taking a big, deep breath is kind of the feeling that this year is bringing in. And ideally, you will be working with your breath consciously and intentionally this year. It'd be a great time to pick up a breathwork practice. By the way, it would be a great time to just set some timers on your phone or write some reminders and put them on your bathroom mirror or write them on your hand or something like that. Breathe deep, right? You are breathing. Life is breathing you. Our breath is directly connected to our minds. And you might notice that if you feel stressed out and mentally kind of closed, it's a feeling of stress often, your breath will naturally become more constricted, shallower, and maybe less present. This is very different than if you feel at ease and relaxed and sensual or playful. The breath then becomes fuller, right? More saturated inside the body. Working with your breath is working with your mind. And Gemini, as an air sign, as a sign that directly connects us to breathing, is also a sign that is very much connected to the mind. And our minds are tricky creatures. They are meant to be flexible, associative, and slippery in some ways. Our minds move very quickly. They jump from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. And often the ways that they jump become habituated and patterned. And our minds really love to tell stories. And when they get patterned around certain stories. They love to tell those stories over and over and over and over again. And probably all the stories that our minds tell have an associated breathing pattern. This season and this upcoming year, this upcoming cycle of Jupiter in your 11th house, is a season definitely in a cycle of expansion in your life. It's asking you to open your horizons, to get out there, to meet new people, to invite in new opportunities. But it is also really asking you to bring a different kind of space into your mind and into the ways that you tell stories about what life is and who you are in your life. When you notice what your stories are, then you have capacity to inform those stories, evolve them, change them, and sometimes necessarily stop telling them. This feels to me like a big theme for Gemini season. Over the course of the season, and especially in the second half of the season, you want to be doing the work of internal reflection and observant awareness, recognizing where you're telling yourself stories about yourself, about other people, and about the world that do not serve your growth and expansion, that keep your perspective limited and that keep the sky, not broad, right? It feels like, oh, life is like shutting in on you. This is a season and a cycle to work skillfully and brilliantly with your mind and practice telling yourself stories that lead you to possibility. Now, I'm not always, going to be out here like singing the gospel of imaginal manifestation, right? I don't think that just because we think about something, it's going to be true. But our thoughts are directly connected to our bodies, right? Like your mind is directly connected to your breath. The stories that you tell connect very deeply to your soma, to your physical body. And there have been studies, and regular training programs, right, with athletes, where they've done these kinds of studies of comparison with athletes who imagine lifting weights versus athletes who are actually lifting weights, and shown that both groups build muscle. And I don't remember if it's like exactly the same. It's probably not. But imagining doing a physical activity, like if you imagine doing a handstand right now, and like actually imagine the steps of it. You need to place your hands on the ground. They need to be about shoulder width apart or maybe a little wider. You're going to have a balance between the heels of your hands and your fingertips. And then somehow you're going to have to get your legs up in the air, right? And that's going to require like propulsion. That's going to require a kick. Your pelvis, one of the heaviest parts of your body, is going to have to get higher than your head, and your head is going to have to go towards the earth. Spend a minute, right? Like thinking about a physical activity. If a handstand feels complicated, think about taking a step. What is required of your body? And as you think about it, your mind teaches your body. You can use your mind to relax your brain. You can use your mind to expand your breath. Your mind, a lot of the times, is using you, right? Your mind, a lot of the times, is using you to go on its same habitual loops of storytelling. You want to use your mind and choose which stories you are telling so that these stories can become real inside your life. What are the stories that you tell yourself about friendship? Okay, this is a big one in Gemini season. in the next cycle of Jupiter and Gemini over the next year. What are the stories that you tell yourself about groups? How you fit in or don't fit in? How you are appreciated or not appreciated? Valued or not valued? What are the stories that you tell yourself about who you think you need to be for other people? If you're telling yourself stories about your own deficiency, about how you don't belong and nobody likes you, or they're only going to like you if you impress them in X, Y, or Z way, experiment with changing those stories. Experiment with telling yourself stories about what is inherently valuable about your being. Think about a perspective where you can see yourself from the outside, maybe as your highest self, maybe as the archetype of like the best parental energy in the whole world. Gaze upon your own being and appreciate at least one thing. And then tell yourself a story about how that one thing that you're appreciating is valuable and definitely worth being a friend with, definitely contributing to the group. What are the stories that you tell yourself about what's possible for humanity at this time? We're living at a time when the stories that we have been told are devastating. We are living in the toxic residue of thousands of years of storytelling about how people are sinners, about how people are inherently wrong. There are other kinds of stories that people have told about themselves, that people do tell about themselves. There are stories out there about people's inherent goodness, about our basic God-given, divinity-given reciprocity with the earth, how we are here to actually be in communion and be in harmony with life. There are stories about our kind that, we descended from the stuff of stars and that we're here to be part of creation. We're living at a time when a lot of the stories that we're getting about humanity are devastating. Humans are ruining the planet. The only course of, viable outcome for human beings is to leave the planet. This is devastating. This is heartbreaking. This is absolutely toxic for our minds and for our bodies. What kinds of stories are you telling yourself about people, humanity, consciousness at this time on Earth? I really want to encourage you to tell stories of creativity, of remembering, of resilience, of community and friendship. The first week of Gemini season, we are in a week of a full moon, and this full moon axis is lighting up the 11th and 5th houses in your chart. We're going to have a full moon in Gemini's opposite sign, Sagittarius, which is your fellow fire sign. This is also a day when a lot of planetary activity is taking place, including Venus's entry into Gemini. My feeling is that this is a very big, very powerful full moon, and that this is a full moon that is resounding with a lot of the themes that I was just talking about that have to do with the stories that people are telling themselves about who we are and why we're here. There are so many stories happening right now. There's a lot of fake news. There's a lot of propaganda. There is a lot of intentional manipulation and brainwashing and hijacking of our consciousness to push us into states of scarcity and fear so that we will buy into militarized existence and keep consuming. What stories are you telling around this full moon? And who are you connecting with in these stories? This is a moment for you to not indulge and invest in fear. This is a moment for you to really work with psychological programming that has taken up residency in your body and to offer yourself to your healthiest ancestral inheritances and to the greatest possibilities of the future. And when I say your healthiest ancestral inheritances, I am not wanting to discount and exclude the ancestors who were violent, the ancestors who were colonizers, the ancestors who were, full of fuckery or whatever, made bad choices. Even those ancestors have potentials now to deliver lessons into your body, right? These are potential lessons and sites of healing. And so if you're working with ancestral resonance of harm, you might really be thinking about how can you transform and transmute these lineages? How can you give back to the past by changing the future? You are not here single-handedly changing the future at all. You can't control that much. But what you can do is work with your mind. What you can do is work with the stories that you're telling and how your energy is pervading out, infusing and spreading and disseminating into consciousness around you. And any kind of offering that you make at this time that is towards healing and evolution, I believe and I feel in my body that that offering will come back to you 3 to 10 times fold bigger. Any way that you put yourself out with generosity, that generosity will be returned. Any way that you put yourself out with hope, with a feeling of possibility, that hope and possibility will be returned. As we move into the last couple of days of May, there's a sense that your life is really shifting profoundly. I talked about this in your horoscope for Taurus season, but you're really at a moment right now, Leo, that wants you to let go of what holds you back, most particularly insecurities and fear. Most particularly, insecurities and fear of not belonging, of not being loved, of not having what you need. There's plenty of ways that none of us have what we need, right? There's plenty of ways that all of us are living in a world that has been predicated upon separation of people and land. And the feelings of isolation and loneliness and scarcity are abundant. Nobody's arguing that, but they are not the only thing. When you resonate deeply with those kinds of feelings, that's normal, right? We're not trying to make you feel bad for having insecurity, but those resonances are sites of healing. Turn towards them. Care for the parts of you that are fragile and tender, that need your own validation and affirmation, that need your own compassionate understanding. Yeah, babe, it makes sense that you would feel insecure, because look at the human constructed world. Everything has been built to take away actual security and make you think that you're only going to get that by having a lot of money, or having a lot of status. But if you look at the natural world, the earthly world, if you think about the world that's inside of your bodily intelligence and your cellular intelligence, safety is always here. Belonging is always here. The earth is not excluding anybody. All natural landscapes are biodiverse creations of brilliance where every little piece and particle has a reason to be there, right? It's human distortion where we think that the little pieces don't matter. We think that somehow we can eradicate like a whole species or group of people or microbiome and we'll just be fine. That's insanity. That's colonized brainwashing. Don't invest in those kinds of stories. Invest in the stories that everything that is part of you, that is part of your creation, has a reason to be there. And by tending internally, by tending what's here with gratitude, with grace, with care, by tending in ways that get curious about the imbalances instead of oppressing them, suppressing them, or insulting them. By tending, we get brilliance, we get abundance. Nothing about you is wrong. You're not defective. You are a person navigating an experience in the terrestrial reality that humans have created for ourselves over millennia and generations. and you're doing your best right now. So how can you meet what is arising and emerging inside of you with a lot of care, with skill, with love, with compassion, with understanding, and then let that love, compassion, and understanding liberate you to be yourself. You do not need to perform for other people's validation or affirmation. If you are abandoning yourself to get their mark of success or status, that's a loss for you. And whatever they're going to give you is not going to replace your own internal sense of dignity. As we move into the month of June, your work with your own sense of self-tending becomes more and more and more important. And it becomes important because opportunities are opening up. And there are lots of new friends available to you right now. And these are friends that could exist in human form or more than human form. The more that I, open to friendship with clouds, with plants, with animals, with spirit, the more satisfied I feel. Um, I'm a person who has worked really hard to be polyglamorous in my life. And when I say I've worked hard, I've really had to work through, and I continue to work through ideas of scarcity and not enoughness. Oh, there's not enough love, for everybody to have attention. I continue to work through insecurities and ideas that, not everybody can be special or something like that. But those feelings become weaker and weaker. They become less and less important the more I invest in multidimensional relationships. And I feel like this is a period of time when the entire world is a place that you could fall in love with. And it doesn't matter that wars are happening. It doesn't matter that ecosystems are suffering. There's still so much beauty here. There's still so much intelligence here. And when you bring attention and admiration and curiosity to what's already here, guess what? Like now we're vibing, right? Any life form that receives attention and curiosity and admiration and care and a kind of like genuine, sincere gesture of like, hey, can I give you what you want? Can I give you what would help you feel good? Any life form will respond well. You could make friends with a grizzly bear. You could make friends with an octopus by meeting the grizzly bear and meeting the octopus with gentleness, with curiosity, with food. Now, granted, you might get eaten, but how wonderful to be the meal for a grizzly bear. I personally would rather die as a grizzly bear's meal than from lung cancer because I'm breathing toxic air, or because I, was distracted and I walked out into moving traffic. We're all going to die. We are all going to die. That part is unavoidable. If you're worried about taking risks right now, and a lot of the risks that human beings worry about probably won't lead to our death, but in our kind of like biological reflexive reasoning that comes from our primitive brains, oftentimes we feel like that. So for example, think about public speaking. A lot of people are terrified, right, to do public speaking, to put themselves out there. And the feeling in the body, and I've felt this a lot, being in a somewhat public role, I get anxious, and I'll turn on the camera or I'll step in front of somebody and I'll start to talk, and it's like my heart rate goes up and I feel nervous and my hands get clammy and I want to turn around and run away. And if I can be with myself in that fear and be like, wow, Renee, what's happening? What's going on for you? I can find the part of me that on a primal level is worried about not being accepted. And I can find the part of me that on a primal level in my biology and my cellular memory, I know in my experience of human evolution that lives in my body, that acceptance by the group is paramount and is equal to life or death. Now, in my moment of public speaking, Does this mean life or death? No, probably not. But in the way that my bodily memory is registering that level of activation, my body is responding with the kind of fear that might come in with life or death. And so take what works, leave the rest. Not everything is for everybody. What works for me sometimes is to entertain myself from a place of humorous storytelling and be like, okay, what is the absolute worst that could happen? And from that place, kind of try to deduce what my options are. And in general, my processes usually lead me to some place where the best possible outcome will manifest when I don't abandon myself, when I really give myself love and care, because not self abandoning, loving myself, caring for myself allows me to be most attuned. If I do self abandon, if I am not loving myself, if I'm being mean to me, I am not attuned, right? I'm anxious as fuck. And then in my interactions, that's the vibe, right? Like I'm emanating anxiety. And if you feel that in a person, it is uncomfortable versus if you feel a person who's more relaxed in their body, who isn't scared to make a mistake because whatever, mistakes are human and they can love themselves and they're not going to be like uptight and rigid and defensive or whatever. That's way easier to relate with. And and in that kind of deduction for myself, I can feel how even though my reflexive instinctual responses might tell me to fight, flight, or freeze, right? Might tell me that, like, oh my God, I need to hustle or I need to act a certain way in order to get, a social acceptance or something like that. That is fake news. That is brainwashing. That is scarcity mindset. I have to work with myself. I have to breathe. I have to use my mind to relax my body. I have to connect my mind to my heart. And from my heart and in my breath, I can connect in my environment. And once I've done that, usually it feels more fun, more interesting, and more effective. Like I'm going to have better outcomes if I'm playful. If I can like kind of relax and be a little silly, right? And we're Leos. We want to be playful. We want to be silly. We want to have a good time. So let's not be uptight about it, right? Let's use our minds. Let's expand our breath. Let's come into the situation noticing what's going on internally and tending to our needs as best as we can, giving ourselves grace when we don't do it perfectly, and just continuing to see who's here. And then, wow, who's around? Okay, right? Like then you see your options, then you see your choices, then you're like, poly glamorous, right? Ooh, like I want to be over there, and I want to be over there, and I want to be here, and I want to be over there. And your options start to proliferate. And this is the vibe. As we get into June, this is the vibe. You want to play, you want to have a good time, you want to expand your energy. There is like abundant friendship energy coming into your life right now. And this friendship energy really just wants to meet you. It really wants to meet you with collaboration. It wants to meet you with joy. It wants to meet you with love. It wants to meet you with opportunity. And I want you to meet that energy deeply. I want you to meet that energy. And the best way you're going to meet it is by being yourself and loving yourself. This is the vibe through Cancer season. And as we get out of Gemini season and into Cancer season, as we approach the solstice on June 20th, I think a lot of you are really recognizing in a subtle way, in a spiritual way, in an energetic and a bodily way, how you can stay with yourself, how you can be with yourself. And You as a being are multitudinous, right? And so you as a being contain all different aspects of your being. You contain generations inside of yourself. You contain possibilities that have not even yet been birthed. And to really be with yourself is to be with expansiveness. It is to be with this big open sky. And that is my hope for you. That's how I really hope that you feel the possibilities of Gemini season coming through. I want to invite you to bring that vibe to Embodied Astrology. We've got a lot of support for that kind of vibe to happen. Embodied Astrology is a space where we explore astrology as an avenue to self-expansion and expansive opportunity, creativity, and growth. Embodied Astrology is a totally queer-led space, and everybody is welcome. And when I say queer, I mean a lot of things, and definitely what I mean is allowing ourselves to really fill into our multitudinous creative existence and to imagine into the otherwise. There are so many ways that we've all been shut down, stifled, right? Brought up with certain kinds of scarcity or limitations or ideas about who we should be. We should all over ourselves all the time. And at EA, we're really trying to tap into astrology as a language that can help us give our gifts fully and deprogram from what is not good for us. Um, there's a series that has been really helping me this year that is facilitated by my friend and colleague, Sherry Taylor. This series is called Solve e Coagula. In Latin, that means dissolve and congeal. This is a series that Sherry is working with anchored around Saturn and Pisces. And when I'm talking about insecurity and fear and this work that you're doing around psychological repatterning, I am looking at Saturn in Pisces in a major way in your chart. And the way that Sherry is approaching Saturn in Pisces is by reworking the mythology of Saturn. Some of you might be familiar with Saturn's archetype as a patriarchal figure who's stern, who's oppressive, who's rigid, who has a drying, cold quality in the body and things like that. And while certainly those can be some of the manifestations of Saturn as an energetic impulse and archetypal form, when you go beyond and back before the Greek and Western appropriation of this myth, you will find an origin to this story that actually brings you to figures who were very erratic, who were queer, who held an expansive space in the gender potential and spectrum, who slept in the ocean and made their homes on land and were involved in creating civilizations where everybody had enough, where it was the golden age of balance and wellness on Earth. And this is what Sherry is working with us to remember. And she is working with devotional practice and planetary allyship as a way of remembering these potentials and these energetics. This practice has been really bringing me into the roots of a lot of my own insecure patterns. As a Leo rising person and resonating with the Leo charts, again, take it or leave it, not everything is for everybody. I'm really feeling how patriarchy has fucked me up and fucked up my ancestors. It doesn't matter, you know, their assigned genders or gender identity. It happened for all of them. And I'm really feeling how the narratives and the stories that I was given throughout my life, and certainly as a young child, particularly around intimacy and trust and sense of belonging, are narratives that are really ready to be reworked. And in that reworking, I am working to feel that I don't always have to be working, right? So part of like the Leo sensibility and energetic impulse sometimes is to perform. And there can be a way that Leo energy, you know, loves to perform, like in the juicy, creative, you know, clowny way that Leo can be. But there can also be a more neurotic manifestation of that energy that feels like, oh, if I'm not, you know, bringing the light, then nobody will be here, right? And like, if I'm not giving this energy, then nobody will be here. And so then it's like always needing to output. And this does not allow us to rest. This does not allow us to actually really feel what is appropriate and how we want to express our energy. And so, in the messages that I was trying to articulate around, you really want to be yourself right now. And sometimes your true self needs a nap. Sometimes your true self actually needs to go hang out in the shadows for a while, or your true self needs to not be performing, and building comfort inside of yourself that allow you to feel like, oh, there's a give and there's a take, there's a moving out, there's a coming back in. It's okay if I need to let my light go dim for a while. It's okay if I need to actually just be in the dark. The dark is an incredibly fertile place to be. This is the work that Sherry is doing. And for me, this has been a real sanctuary space. So if anything that I offered resonates for you, I definitely want to recommend that you should check out Sherry's space. And also in the space of Pisces in the Leo solar chart, this is a space of the eighth house. This is a place of shadows. This is a place of darkness. It is a place of the psyche and psychology, and where our body, heart, mind, beings are interwoven with the psychology of others. We have the planet Neptune that's been moving through Pisces since 2011. And in 2024 and 2025, Neptune and Saturn are actually both moving out of Pisces. And by 26, they'll enter Aries, your fellow fire sign. And there's a symbol here of really needing to finish up a particular cycle so that the Leo energetic body can reform itself right now. And so just like Sherry's working with dissolving and congealing, we have another series happening at EA led by Gabs 404, who is an artist and an astrologer based in Brazil, that is really working with creative processes around visual art and photography in particular to play in the space of unreality. And they're wanting to do time experimentation and use photography to go back and forward in time to maybe play with, like portraits of your childhood and imagine, oh, what would you have looked like, if there had been abundant support for you to really be who you are? And how would you have expressed yourself if you had lived in a world that really supported you in certain ways? Or what would the future look like if you could really live into your greatest gifts? Like what would be required? What would these gifts then bring to the landscape or something like that? We're going to be exploring how media shapes and unshapes reality. This is, I think, definitely something that just from like a critical awareness space, we all want to be doing right now because we're living at a time of a massive amount of propaganda and manipulation of quote unquote reality through, photo editing and AI and things like that. And as we navigate unreality, we also want to be tuning in with how do we create reality together. And we create reality together by having conversations, by getting to know each other, by dropping into intimacy together. And I think that this is a lot of what the Leo chart wants to do right now. And when I'm talking about what kinds of stories are you telling, I'm also talking about what kinds of worlds are you making. And so you might be interested in Gab's series as well. And their series is offered through a number of different drop-in events, and they have one of these events coming up in early June. Finally, every single month, we have a space called Artistic Alchemy that's facilitated by Junata Petrus. Junata is an author, a playwright, a soul sweetener, and a runaway witch, a cosmic bag lady. She is a tarot reader and an astrologer and a divine being who does a lot of divination in many different ways. All, I think, really in an offering to support creativity to proliferate here in people's bodies and on the earth. Her work right now is really concentrated on supporting creativity and supporting us all as creative beings needing to survive inside of capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy, and to use our creative gifts to make different worlds and also to care for ourselves and care for our needs. Every single month near the full moon, she offers a drop-in space to work with her practices, her prompts, to connect with your creative intuition, your divine inspiration, and also your ancestral inheritances, gifts, possibility models out there in the world, and make commitments for yourself, schedules for yourself, ways to just check in throughout the month and keep yourself uh, supported in these creative offerings. So she'll have a recording available near the 23rd Sagittarius full moon, and you can also drop in on June 23rd, right as we get into Cancer season with the Capricorn full moon. Every single week, I am on Zoom with a drop-in space called Somatic Space, where we just work with the astrological influences as prompts for meditation and embodiment. These are gentle practices that are really meant to rejuvenate and restore, where we love ourselves and love on our bodies, and also where we do a lot of the work that I've been talking about here by tuning in and checking in with what stories are here and how are our minds and bodies connecting with one another and shaping one another, and then moving out into our experiences and expressions. You can find all the information at embodiedastrology.com. Depending on the platform that you're tuning in with, you can find show notes and links and bios and things like that. I am wishing you all the best in Gemini season and beyond, my Leo friends. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.